No one could kill anyone in this. That's not a possibility.
Hello.
It said sequels are never as good as the first, but The Godfather, Toy Story, Star Wars, and countless other franchises would beg to differ. Sometimes sequels miss the mark due to filmmakers being wildly misguided on why their original concept was so groundbreaking and influential, and I don't believe any genre embodies that better than horror. Most initial horror movie franchise installments get an audience's blood pumping, which brings people back for years to come. And what people fear most is the unknown. Unfortunately, once a horror movie concludes, audiences need some form of closure so they feel a sense of catharsis at the end. Though, sometimes this sense of closure explains away the evil, shooting filmmakers in the foot. Only a few franchise sequels actually avoid this issue, and today we're going to explain the 4 ways around it.
Popcorn.
You're making popcorn?
Well, I'm getting ready to watch a video.
Really? What?
Oh, just some scary movie.
I love horror movies, I do. Unfortunately, once a horror movie gets to the climax, you need a sense of closure, and you need a sense of okay, this is the end, we're wrapping things up. You have to explain something to the audience. That way it feels like there actually is a true ending. Unfortunately, with horror, if you explain too much, then the horror doesn't translate to its sequel. So it's a really difficult balancing act that you have to perform as a filmmaker or storyteller with horror, if you're having a continuous saga of horror storytelling.
Come to Freddy.
Horror movie sequels kind of miss the mark a lot of the time because they explain too much. And it depends on how you use your protagonist. So if your protagonist jumps from movie 1 to movie 2 to movie 3 and so on and so forth, then it gets difficult because that character can only evolve so much before they become too perfect, and you can't really have horror revolve around them. I can barely see and barely breathe. There was no DNA evidence at any of these crime scenes. Doesn't make sense. Anyway, comment, subscribe. It's either that or your protagonist or linchpin to the franchise becomes whatever the force is, the evil force, like Freddy Krueger or so on and so forth. Those characters don't translate over from movie to movie. It's, the Freddy Krueger character or Jason Voorhees or something along those lines. But then you also can't develop that character to be somebody likable. They have to be a murderous, psychopath, creepy person. The slasher genre, or at least the horror genre, is very tricky to work with because it's so fragile. Especially the slasher genre. If you were to introduce any new ingredient into the slasher genre, it devolves into something else. It's so elemental in how it is, the subgenre of slasher, that you can only work with it so much. The only thing you can really do is create a new ability for whatever the slasher creature is. And in my opinion, we really haven't seen anything new since probably Jeepers Creepers, maybe Terrifier, but I gotta be honest, Terrifier is not really my bag. So I don't know.
The one, the only, the classic Halloween.
So, I am unaware of any horror franchise that had more than one movie in the barrel. The only thing that I can think of at least in recent years, is the Halloween trilogy by David Gordon Green. The filmmakers claim that they had 3 movies planned for that trilogy, but it's very obvious that the third one feels a little tacked on and disjointed from the other 3. Had it not been the case, they would have introduced the character of Corey Cunningham a little earlier in the franchise, other than the first scene of the last movie. Even though believe it or not, hot take, I actually like Halloween Ends. It's not a good conclusion.
But who is that?
This is the end of the mystery.
I'm not convinced that you can properly map out a horror saga. The only thing that you can do to insulate yourself from this potential problem of explaining too much is having interesting characters and protagonists that you want to follow. Other than that, you just have to genre bend. Because if you explain the horror at the end of the first movie, and then you go into the sequels, it's okay, well, we're not afraid of it anymore. Well, you've explained it away. It's no longer scary to me. Michael Myers is a part of the cult of Thorn. Everyone loved that, didn't they? No, they didn't. They absolutely didn't. Well, it depends. That's franchise is so fractured. There's people who love this part and this part. There's more time travel that happens in the Halloween franchise than any other time travel franchise I've ever seen. It's insane. I've said it before, but horror and comedy are interlinked, both dealing with the element of surprise. This is wildly apparent, being that most comedy filmmakers from the early 2000s, such as Jordan Peele, David Gordon Green, Todd Phillips, and Zach Cregger, have left their last behind for screams. The ever-popular horror comedy genre is another example of this phenomenon. Once the initial shock of what the horror is wears off, we become familiar with the insanity and become indulgent with it. Evil Dead, Insidious, and other examples of how horror can become funny after a prolonged period of time. So, the Evil Dead franchise, this was made in the 70s. They initially wanted this to be like a scary, spooky, scary thing. This was just like a bunch of kids in the woods putting together a movie. And once they watched the first movie, they're like, this is insane. This is insanity. Then you had Evil Dead 2, which is just an absolute cluster of insanity. And then you got Ash versus the Evil Dead, the TV series, and then obviously you have the cult classic of Army of Darkness, which originally was named Medieval Dead, which I found hilarious. I wish they kept that, but here we are. But you take the horror elements, you make it into the surprise elements, and you take it from horror and put it into comedy. When this happens, this is completely intentional. So it's usually with a horror franchise that more or less has failed. So not failed financially or critically, failed in that it didn't do a proper job of scaring its audience. So, for example, well, I'll use Leprechaun. There are moments in Leprechaun that are really funny.
What kind of voodoo you boys into?
Leprechaun in the Hood. Like, what are we doing here? Like, usually at that time in the early 2000s, like the horror franchise people, like Jason X, he goes to space, but like Leprechaun, they put in the hood. Like, I don't know what was going on there. It's very odd. Another thing is like Child's Play. The very first Child's Play is actually like in my opinion, one of the better slasher films out there. It's just very disturbing. But the thing is, like, at first blush, outside looking in, when you tell people you're watching a slasher movie about a doll, they make fun of it. So eventually the franchise like kind of devolved into like a comedy thing, like Seed of Chucky. Like that, there's barely any horror elements in there at all. It's really like a family drama about like a father accepting his trans kid. Like that's what that movie's about. Like it's kind of wild and way ahead of its time. Those franchises kind of, obviously you still have the horror roots, but like if you were to look at it from a structural standpoint, it has more akin to comedy than it does than horror. There aren't scares in those movies. It's really kind of roundabout ways to make an audience chuckle.
This weapon will be called the Terminator.
You're dead, honey.
Terminator, Alien, and the 2018 Halloween reboot are examples of an evolving story where characters face an insurmountable threat, escaping by the skin of their teeth, only to return and fight back with thrilling vigor. The franchise weans off of its horror elements and instead directs its attention towards thrilling action, the initial threat of horror being used as a catalyst to explore combat and chills down a more experimental avenue. Terminator, that's the prime example here. The very first one is it is a slasher, you can say that. It's an unstoppable robot sent from the future to kill this one woman, and she's just got to survive, and that's it. And they get by the skin of their teeth and have it crushed by some pneumatic actuator. Second one, now that very same robot is on their side, and he's helping out. Instead of the hard dread of like, holy shit, we're f***ed, they still kind of are f***ed in the second one, but instead of like, we're completely f***ed, it's more of a... The story is no longer about the like fear of the unknown. The story now becomes about a robot more or less becoming a surrogate father to the John Connor character, and Alien as well. Both of these being James Cameron vehicles. Alien and the Alien franchise, his sequel Aliens, is more or less a remake of the very first Alien movie. The only difference being that he bended the genre. Whereas Alien was a horror film where the slasher creature was an alien on a spaceship. They were isolated on this spaceship. It is now this lady who once faced off against the xenomorph is now bringing the fight to the xenomorphs to take back her, initial, like her power, I guess you can consider it. That movie, The Aliens, is more or less a movie or an allegory about motherhood. And the 2018 reboot of Halloween. The final sequence of that is an inversion of the climax to the very first movie, where Michael Myers is stalking Laurie Strode around her house. Laurie Strode is now stalking Michael Myers around the house, her own house. There's a shot where Michael Myers pushes Laurie out of a window off the second floor, and she lands in the grass, and he looks away and he looks back and she's gone, which is essentially the final sequence of the original Halloween franchise. But now we flip it on its head and say, okay, Laurie is now on the attack. So we took the horror elements of the very first film and we restructured it to be like more of a thrilling action, go get 'em kind of thing. There's no like, comments, or subscribes in here. Does anyone at home have any that they can spare?
Maybe that's not actually coming for our family. Because that would be crazy.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Franchises like Friday the 13th and Final Destination do nothing new with the franchise. There's a clear formula that the first installment mastered, and the sequels will be an incessant reminder of it. In Friday the 13th, there's kids in a campground being stalked by an unstoppable monster. In Final Destination, a group of kids escape death only to be killed by Rube Goldberg machines. You as a storyteller, you usually, in stories, you don't want to explain too much. I once heard that every story is a mystery, and at the end of it, you want to have the mysteries solved for you. In horror, you don't want the mystery to be the thing. You don't want it to be the creature, or the monster, or the killer. Do not have that be the thing. The mystery should come from the characters who you're following. You want to see if this couple breaks up at the end of the franchise. You want to see if the protagonist develops into a stronger human being and how that influences the story. Otherwise, if you make the catalyst or the inciting incident the creature or the monster that terrorizes the town, that's not going to bode well for you, because if that's all you got in the barrel, you only got one movie out of it. You have to prolong it. That's why the Scream franchise has gone on as long as it has, because it's not technically a horror movie. It's a whodunit.
You never told me your name.
Why do you want to know my name?
I want to know who I'm looking at.
The very first movie is like, okay, this is an insulated, perfect incident. We're just going to take this and we're just going to remake it over and over again. The hard part about horror sequels, if you were to keep the protagonists from the first movie and have them carry over into the second and third and fourth or what have you, that's when it gets a little dicey, because the characters are now familiar with the evil of the world. And that they will eventually no longer be afraid of it due to exposure therapy, essentially. This methodology of just essentially remaking the first movie over and over again, you just create a new cast of characters in the same situation. You just keep pooping out the same movie over and over again. From a money-making perspective, is kind of an ingenious thing to do. The Saw franchise is an example of that. Obviously, you have Jigsaw, has moderate character development, but let's be honest, not really. What are we doing here? You're really there for the Saw traps, and you want to see the mechanisms that he comes up with. The Purge is weird. Yeah, the Purge, the very first movie in The Purge was actually a home invasion movie, which didn't make sense. And then the second movie was there's a character who's essentially Batman. I don't know what the Purge franchise is doing. The initial concept is kind of an ingenious thing to do, because it's such a brilliant vehicle to create a movie franchise around it. It's just the way they went about it was the most nonsensical, off-putting way that I can imagine anyone doing. The first movie's about a home invasion, which, okay, cool. That home invasion movies are scary. But also, why did you use the backdrop of, okay, all crime is legal in America now, only to focus on these four walls? That's just weird. Why would you do that? And then the sequel is okay, well, we're going to focus on doing more. We're going to be out in the city now. Okay, yeah, cool, we're doing that. But, the protagonists are so unlikable and stupid that it's just oh, we're getting gas at 7 in the afternoon and it's purge day. It's like, are you stupid? I actually that might be the most frustrating franchise that I've ever seen, because I really wanted to like that franchise and I never did. Give me a purge movie where I want moral repugnance, I want a lot of dumb violence, and I just want to be stupid. I just want it to be like a dumb thing. And I didn't get that. Instead I got a dumb movie.
She was almost murdered.
Wasn't it her brother who murdered all those babysitters?
This is the least common and arguably hardest to achieve. Halloween 2 and The Strangers Prey at Night are examples of where the initial film doesn't explain away the evil, and the climax of the film is concluded by something more personal outside of discovering the monster's one true weakness, leaving further sequels to ruin the franchise instead. So yeah, alright, so like end of Halloween, right? They do not explain Michael Myers. The original Halloween ends on a cliffhanger of like, okay, Michael Myers is still out there. But it's not a like... Initially it was not supposed to be a like, okay, the sequel's coming, ooh... Initially, it was supposed to be like okay, yes, he is more than human. The evil, like true evil, does exist, and for some reason, this person of Michael Myers is manifesting the evil for one reason or another. We do not know. In The Strangers, the scariest, in my opinion, the scariest moment is at the very end, where the characters ask the strangers, like, "Why are you doing this?" And the strangers simply say, "Because you were home." That's the scariest thing that they could have said. If they didn't say anything, that would be less scary. Obviously, like, because you as the audience are like, you want to have some kind of closure. But that like bit of closure, that one like little nugget of truth, was just like not enough to satiate you at all. In fact, it made more questions. The sequel didn't explain anything. Those two movies end in a way that doesn't explain a goddamn thing and left it open for the sequels to up. Which the sequels, let's be honest, up. Michael Myers, in my opinion, works better when he is not Laurie Strode's brother. Him just being a shark in the water, just killing at random, is way more intense and disturbing than anything else. Because I am not related to Michael Myers, and outside of being close to Laurie Strode, which I never will be, I'm in the clear now. I'm not afraid of Michael Myers. If you give criteria to why the killings or evil is happening, then you as the audience are like, well, I'll never do that. There's nothing to fear. I'm good. I'm not related to Laurie Strode. My parents didn't burn somebody to death in a boiler room. I was never a camp counselor who neglected to watch a child drown. Like, there's so many other factors here that like you are completely so far removed from the evil that is happening on screen. Like Jurassic Park, like I find Jurassic Park like absolutely thrilling and one of the most intense movies ever made. But like I know I will never be put in that situation, one, because dinosaurs are extinct, and also because I would never go to a place like that. It doesn't make sense. Why would I do that to myself, white people? Oh, honey, you want to have a quick getaway weekend? We'll go to this theme park with minimal security and scaly beasts that can eat us whole. Let's head on over. I got tickets. Let's go. I want to see the Wayans brothers do a parody, like a spoof of Jurassic Park. If I had any say in what the Wayans brothers do with their lives, make fun of Jurassic Park. Anyway, guys, that's it for this video. I hope I educated you on something. If I did, I don't know what. This doesn't make sense. Anyway, have a good day. That's all, folks. There's something written on here. You've heard of Mike and Ike's. Now, you have like, comment, and subscribes.
Make sure to leave a comment down below your favorite scary movie sequel.
That?